a young girl with little to her name, an old piano worn by time, and a dream that no one believed in, until the moment she carefully placed her fingers on those faded keys and faced a room filled with sneers and doubtful stares. There were no dazzling spotlights to shine upon her, no grand orchestra to accompany her, and no crowd cheering her on. The only unwavering support came from her mother, a woman who had silently swallowed years of pain and sacrifice, carrying a heavy burden all her life, just so she could one day stand proud and say, "That's my daughter." Before we follow Emma's incredible journey, if you believe that true worth is measured not by where we come from or how we look, but by the passion and grit within, please like this video and subscribe. Your encouragement helps bring inspiring stories like hers to light, reminding us all what's possible now. Picture a cold winter morning in a close, knit Nebraska town, a place where thick fog clings stubbornly to school bus windows and the wind sighs softly through the cracks in weathered doors. It's here that 12-year-old Emma Brooks often wakes up before the rest of her classmates, not to get ready for school like most kids, but to lend a hand to her mother before the day even begins. Emma's mother, Lena Brooks, was the family's sole provider, working long hours cleaning tables at a small cafe. The hard labor left marks on her hands and weariness in her eyes, but Lena never complained. She held onto a quiet hope for a better life for her daughter. Emma, knowing this without words, rose early every day to stand beside her mother, helping in any way she could, even if it meant missing out on a carefree childhood. Their modest apartment was on the second floor of a faded red brick building, just steps away from a noisy train station. The walls were stained with age, and the ceiling bore watermarks from years of leaks. At night, the sounds of passing trains echoed through the streets, a lullaby mingled with memories both painful and hopeful. In the smallest room stood an object of priceless value to them, an old upright oak piano. Its paint was chipped and faded, the ivory keys yellowed and uneven, and its notes often fell out of tune. But for Lena and Emma, this piano was more than an instrument. It was a cherished heirloom. Lena had held onto this piano through every hardship. It was the last gift from her late father, a wandering musician who traveled from town to town, playing piano in diners and bars. He was a man full of passion and gentle strength, who had passed on his love of music to Lena before he died. This piano was a living link to that past, a symbol of hope for the future. From a young age, Lena taught Emma to play by ear, gently guiding her small hands over the keys. "Don't just learn the notes," Lena would say softly. "Feel the music in your heart. Let it tell your story." Without lessons or sheet music, Emma learned under the warm glow of a lamp, sitting side by side with her mother through countless quiet nights. Emma never played to impress or to show off. Her music was soft and deliberate, carrying stories with each note. Stories of blackout nights when they huddled together for warmth, of cold afternoons when the heat failed and the apartment felt like a cave, and of small moments filled with love, like sharing a single bowl of noodles on a rainy day. At school, Emma was shy and kept mostly to herself. Her brown hair was always tied back neatly, her jacket patched in places, and her shoes worn thin from many hard days. She had few friends and often felt the sting of pity from classmates who saw only her worn clothes, not the bright spirit inside. But when Emma sat at the piano, none of that mattered. The music carried her away from her struggles into a world where hope lived in every note. One afternoon, after finishing her chores in the school library, a job she took to earn free lunches, Emma found an old, dusty piano tucked away in a forgotten corner. Its strings were loose, and many keys creaked, but to Emma, it was a treasure. She lifted the heavy lid, tested the keys, and though many sounded off-key, her eyes lit up with joy. She played, not for applause, not for an audience, but simply to let the music flow. The imperfect melodies filled the quiet room, rich with heart and memory. At home, Lena sat sewing a patch on Emma's worn school shirt. Her gaze drifted to a faded photo on the wall, a picture of her father smiling softly, fingers resting lightly on piano keys, eyes distant but alive with music. "Dad," Lena whispered, voice heavy with emotion, "I hope wherever you are, you can hear your granddaughter's song." To most, a piano is just an instrument. But for Lena and Emma, it was much more, a symbol of love, strength, and the unbreakable bond that carried them through life's hardest moments. For Emma and her mother, music was more than just sound. It was their private language of love, a way to hold on to memories and stay rooted through life's toughest storms. Emma never dreamed of bright stage lights or thunderous applause. Her only hope was that every time her fingers touched those worn piano keys, her mother might forget the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders, that her grandfather might smile down on her from somewhere far away, and that Emma herself might feel a sense of belonging, if only for the 3 minutes it took to play a melancholy song. That week, Millstone Elementary School posted a big announcement right on the main bulletin board: Welcome to Talent Week. Artistic performances, music, dance, short skits, all are welcome. Sign up at the office by Wednesday. The schoolyard buzzed with excitement like a hive of restless bees. Groups of friends huddled together, planning their acts with eager voices. Some promised to perform the latest TikTok dances, others showed off sparkling costumes their mothers had just bought. Meanwhile, Emma quietly walked alone, her worn backpack slipping off one shoulder, clutching a small music notebook her mother had carefully handwritten for her. When the recess bell rang, Emma stood before the sign-up sheet, holding a battered pencil. The last line was still blank. She knew that once she wrote her name there would be no turning back. With a steady breath, she wrote in small, slanted letters, Emma Brooks, piano, Claire de Lune debut. The moment she finished, laughter erupted behind her. Emma? Piano. Who even knew she had a piano? She's probably bringing one of those tiny toy keyboards from McDonald's. The laughter was sharp and loud, and some kids took pictures of the sign-up sheet to share with their friends, adding rolling, on the floor, laughing emojis. Emma lowered her head, gripped her notebook tightly, and quietly walked back to class. No words, no response. That evening in their cramped apartment, Lena was reheating a pot of vegetable soup when she noticed Emma sitting silently in front of the piano. Not playing, just staring at the faded white keys. Did something happen at school, sweetheart? Lena asked gently. Emma hesitated, then sighed. They said I'd make a fool of myself if I performed. Do you believe them? Lena asked softly, sitting beside her daughter and resting a hand on her shoulder. Emma looked down. I'm not sure. Lena smiled sadly. You know, I used to play that very piece when I was your age. Grandpa taught me every note. Every time I played it, it was like telling his life story. You didn't choose that piece to win applause. You chose it to tell our story. The story of you, me, and your grandfather. If you play it with all your heart, no one can laugh at that. Emma looked up at her mother, her eyes searching but clouded with doubt. You'll be all right? Lena promised. Even if I have to skip my entire morning shift to be there. From that day forward, Emma practiced every night. Though the old piano's notes were sometimes flat or out of tune, and the passing trains outside threatened to drown her out, she kept going. Each passage became smoother, more heartfelt, still imperfect, but filled with a tender feeling, as if she was rewriting her mother's dreams with her own fingers. Finally, the day of the performance arrived. Millstone's assembly hall was decked out with balloons and twinkling lights. A small wooden stage stood ready, and rows of folding chairs filled quickly with students, parents, and teachers. Lena arrived early, wearing a neatly pressed but worn white blouse, holding a small bouquet of wild daisies she'd picked by the roadside. One by one, the acts went on, vibrant K-pop dance groups, a boy magician turning paper into flowers, a girl singing pop songs with a wireless microphone. The audience cheered and clapped, camera flashes popping constantly. Emma sat backstage alone, her hands folded nervously in her lap. A few students glanced her way, snickering. One held up a phone, ready to record for laughs. Finally, her name was called. The MC's voice sounded hesitant. Next, we have a piano solo, Claire de Lune, performed by Emma Brooks. A smattering of polite claps, a few stifled giggles. Emma stepped onto the stage, no colorful lights, no backup track, just the old library piano, wheeled in and wiped clean of dust. Before her stretched a sea of faces, dimly lit under the spotlight, some curious, some skeptical. She sat down on the bench, back straight, her small hands resting gently on the yellowed keys. The stage lights cast a long shadow of her across the wooden floor. The murmurs hadn't fully died down. Some whispered comments. What's she gonna play? Probably mess up and cry. But Emma didn't look down. She closed her eyes. In that moment, she was no longer in Millstone Elementary's auditorium. She was back in her tiny room at home, beside her mother. The cold wind seeped through the window cracks. The distant sound of a train horn echoed faintly. Her mother, tired from long shifts, nodded gently, a tired smile lighting her face. Emma took a deep breath. Then her fingers began to move. No microphone, no backing track. Just the first soft notes of Claire de Lune, rising like morning mist settling over a still lake. The old piano creaked slightly, but the sound lingered. each note a whisper, something deeply personal, intimately familiar, yet long forgotten. At first, the audience didn't quite pay attention. Some kids shifted in their seats. One mother quickly checked her phone. But then, as if an invisible hand had lifted a veil, silence spread. Not the silence of boredom, but a hush that falls when people sense something sacred. A music teacher, taking notes, looked up, her pen slipped from her fingers unnoticed. An older parent in the front row removed his glasses, wiped them with his sleeve, and left them off, his eyes red and glistening. The music soared like dreams taking flight, then softened like gentle memories brushing the heart. And the one playing this piece was a girl without private tutors, without sparkling costumes, without a cheering crowd, only the quiet strength of a story told from the heart. In the very last row of the auditorium, Lena sat clutching a bouquet of wild daisies, as if holding onto the last warm fragments of her youth. Emma still had her eyes closed. She wasn't just performing anymore. She had become one with the music. When the final note faded away like a gentle breeze drifting through the room, a profound silence settled over the entire hall. 1 second passed, then 2, then 3. And then the first applause broke the stillness, not from the loudest voices or the most obvious supporters, but from the one person no one expected, the principal. Known for her strictness, she stood and began clapping. One teacher followed, then a senior student. Slowly, the entire auditorium joined in. No cheers, no whistles, just steady, respectful applause. Each clap felt like a silent apology for the earlier laughter, a quiet thank you, an acknowledgement of the story Emma had just told through her music. Emma remained seated, hands trembling ever so slightly. When she finally opened her eyes, they were calm, eyes of someone who had just shed an invisible weight. In the audience, Lena rose to her feet, but she didn't clap. She simply stood, one hand pressed over her heart, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on her daughter. Her face was wet with tears, yet her smile shone bright, the radiant light of early spring breaking through a long winter. Emma walked off the stage and down a narrow hallway behind the auditorium. Leaning against the cool wall, she clutched her mother's handwritten music notebook. No flashes of cameras, no reporters. Just a quiet moment alone where she knew she hadn't lost herself. She hadn't been afraid. She had spoken the story of her mother, her grandfather, and herself in a language that needed no words. A soft sound came from behind her. Emma turned. An elderly woman stood there, a figure with silver hair, draped in a long blue-gray coat, wearing a small name badge. She stepped forward, eyes both warm and sharp. "You must be Emma, right? I'm Margaret Ellis, director of the Windermere Academy of Music's talent program," she said gently. Emma's eyes widened. Before she could reply, Margaret continued. "I came to see my daughter's performance earlier, but you're the reason I stayed." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. "Have you ever thought about studying music seriously?" Margaret asked, her tone gentle but firm. Emma stood frozen, overwhelmed. She looked up at the woman, the director of the talent program at Windermere Academy, a prestigious institution known for training gifted children to perform on grand stages. Emma had never imagined a conversation like this. I don't have a teacher. I can't really read sheet music very well," Emma said quietly, her voice hesitant. Margaret smiled knowingly, not surprised in the least. "I know exactly why I stayed. Sometimes what we're looking for isn't found in sheet music or perfect technique. It's found in the heart, and you have something rare. The kind of spark many lose while chasing perfection." At that moment, Lena arrived backstage, watching hesitantly, not yet understanding what was unfolding. Margaret turned and greeted her. "Hello, I'm Margaret Ellis. Your daughter has a very rare gift, the ability to tell stories through music." Lena was speechless. She gently squeezed Emma's hand, as if to anchor her back to the present. After several minutes of conversation, Margaret invited Emma to visit the academy for an official audition the following Saturday. There was a special scholarship program for students from challenging backgrounds who showed exceptional musical potential. No need to prepare extensively. Just come and play the piece you love most. That evening, in their tiny apartment, Emma and her mother sat quietly across from each other in the kitchen nook. The pot of vegetable soup still steamed on the stove, untouched. Lena looked at her daughter softly and asked, "Do you want to go?" Emma nodded. "I want to try, Mom, even if it's just once." Saturday arrived, and the two caught the earliest bus, carrying Emma's worn music notebook, a bag of homemade sandwiches, and a fragile bundle of hope mixed with nervous anticipation pulsing through every heartbeat. Windermere Academy sat on the northern edge of a sprawling town, its grounds wide and open. framed by a curved row of iron gates and a polished brass nameplate. Emma stepped through the gates feeling like her heart had dropped into her stomach. Inside was a different world entirely. Children in crisp white shirts and shiny name badges tuned violins, warmed up their voices, and practiced scales with instructors. Emma felt small, almost invisible. Margaret welcomed them into the grand main hall and led Emma into a soundproof room, the audition space. At its center stood a grand piano bathed in soft light. "You can play any piece you love," Margaret said kindly. Emma took a deep breath and sat down. The grand piano's black and white keys felt like old friends, even if much newer than her upright at home. But instead of playing Claire de Lune, the piece she had performed at school, Emma played something she had composed herself, Rain and Light. It was a melody born from rainy afternoons, when she and her mother sat by the window eating instant noodles and watched water run down the streets. Each note was slow, delicate, nothing flashy. But every sound painted a scene: the patter of falling rain, the smell of vegetable soup simmering, the hum of her mother sewing, the warm yellow light spilling over their table. The room fell completely silent as the final note drifted out like a soft sigh. Margaret remained motionless, eyes gently closed. "You've never studied composition?" "No, ma'am, I just play what I remember and feel," Emma answered softly. Margaret turned to the technician. "Said this recording to the board. Noti untrained applicant but raw undeniable musical ability." As mother and daughter prepared to leave, Lena hesitated. "Excuse me, but if Emma's accepted, I won't be able to afford everything. Bus fare, lodging, books." Margaret studied her for a moment, then smiled warmly. "If Emma is the reason she plays the way she does, then I believe the Academy would be honored to welcome both of you." Emma officially entered Windmere Academy at the start of autumn, when the trees were turning bronze and the air carried the faint scent of damp wood. In her left hand, she pulled a worn fabric suitcase. In her right, Lena carried a bag filled with dry food, towels, and the most precious possession, a music notebook. The school had a dormitory wing for scholarship students. Emma's room was on the second floor, small but spotless, with a crisp white bed and a window overlooking a garden filled with maple trees. Everything felt too new, too quiet, too unfamiliar. Her first class was vocal anatomy and sound technique. The teacher handed out colorful printed diagrams of the larynx, voice types, and instructions on how to use the diaphragm. Emma stared at the intricate illustrations. It looked like advanced biology, unfamiliar and confusing. She leaned over to her seatmate and whispered, "Do we have to memorize all this?" The girl glanced at her and shrugged. "You've never learned this before." "That's weird. I've been studying it for months." In sight reading class, Emma struggled. The notes, rests, and ties, the symbols her peers treated like a second language, felt like an impenetrable maze to her. She played by instinct, by ear, by reflex. But the teacher reminded her gently, "You've got natural talent, but you also need to learn how to understand music. Not just feel it." At lunch in the cafeteria, other students chatted about Chopin's List, Level 8 piano curricula, and past performances in New York and Chicago. Emma sat quietly, her lunch wrapped in cloth by her mom. No fancy lunchbox, no organic juice. Behind her, a group of first-year students whispered, "That's Emma, the girl who played Claire de Lune at the public school last month." "Yeah, my mom showed me the clip. She was good, but kinda rustic, not trained." That night, Emma sat alone on a bench behind the dormitory. The scent of wet grass lingered as polished piano playing drifted from practice rooms, precise, dazzling, like it belonged to another world. She opened her old music notebook. On the first page was a line her mother had written in blue ink. "Music is what you haven't found the words to say. Speak with your heart, my love." A deep voice spoke softly, breaking the quiet. Late and not sleeping, Emma turned to see Mr. Oliver, the composition teacher in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and his ever-present wool scarf. He sat beside her. "I used to be a scholarship student here too, from a little lakeside town. Back then, I didn't know anything about notation either. Reading music felt like a foreign language." Emma smiled faintly. He continued, "But I had this one thing. Every time I played, I remembered my grandmother. She was the first to let me hear music through an old radio with almost dead batteries. That was real music. No technique can teach you that kind of feeling." Emma's hand rested on her notebook. "At the end of this semester," he said, "you'll each perform a piece you've chosen, not for a grade, but to say, 'This is me.' Can I choose someone else's piece?" she asked. "Of course." He smiled. But if you really want people to remember you, pick something only you can tell. That night, Emma reopened the piece she'd played in the living room. Rain and Light. For the first time she wrote it down, truly wrote it, not just holding it in her mind. She used 5-line staffs, wrote notes, made revisions, recalling the rhythm of her mother's claps when she was little. Windmere Academy's end of semester recital was on a gentle Friday afternoon. The maple leaves had turned golden red, and the late autumn sunlight streamed through the theater windows like streaks of memory. Willow Hall, the Academy's old wooden concert hall, glowed under warm lights. The audience seats quickly filled with parents, teachers, talent scouts, local music journalists, and notable alumni, each holding a printed program listing every performance. Number 17, Emma Brooks, Rain and Light. Original composition. Lena sat in the third row near the aisle, clutching a fabric handbag, holding a handkerchief embroidered with her daughter's name. She hadn't brought flowers or a phone to record, only the trembling heart of a mother who had given up her youth, now watching her child's small dream begin to bloom. Before Emma came a series of showstoppers, a Beethoven sonata performed at breakneck speed, a violin act intertwined with modern dance, a dazzling Broadway number complete with lights and color. Then the MC's voice echoed, "Next, an original piece from a first-year student. Please welcome Emma Brooks with Rain and Light." No spotlight, no confetti, just a girl with neatly tied hair, wearing a light blue dress and a tiny sun pendant, a birthday gift from her mother years ago. Emma walked to the center of the stage and sat at the piano, her hands resting on the keys. The warm light softly lit her face. In that moment, all other sounds seemed to vanish. Then the first notes rang out. The melody wasn't fast or complex, but every note carried something deep. The sound of light rain on a tin roof, sunlight slipping through curtains, the smell of vegetable soup on a cold day, the feeling of her mother's hand when they had nothing but each other. Rain and Light was a story no one else but Emma could tell, and the audience understood. A music professor put down her pen. An elderly man in the back row placed a hand over his chest. Eliza, the girl who had once ignored Emma on their first day, watched intently, eyes brimming, whispering to her roommate, I didn't think I'd get emotional." When the final note echoed, lingering like the last drop of dew falling from a leaf, the hall remained silent, a silence too sacred to break with rushed applause. Then the first clap came from Lena. She didn't stand, she simply clapped slowly, eyes wet with tears, still holding the hand-stitched handkerchief. After that, the entire auditorium joined in. Emma bowed, but this time she didn't tremble or drop her gaze. She looked straight toward the third row, where her mother's eyes were waiting. In them there was no more worry, only pride. The next morning, Emma and Lena sat at a small cafe just outside the school gate. Mr. Oliver walked in, carrying an envelope. He set it down on the table. "Congratulations," he said. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning." Lena opened the letter. Clear words, "We are honored to grant a full official scholarship to student Emma Brooks. In addition, Windmere Academy warmly invites Miss Lena Brooks to serve as music library coordinator beginning next term." Lena was speechless. Emma whispered, "Mom, I get to stay with you." Years later, when Emma became a composer and was invited back as an honorary faculty member, a journalist asked her, "What was the turning point in your career?" Emma smiled softly. "My very first recital in an old wooden hall, with a grand piano and just one person who stood up to clap first. That person was my mother, and I played a piece I had never said out loud in my entire life." And so, the journey of Emma Brooks came full circle, from an old piano in a tiny apartment to a concert hall filled with tearful eyes, from cruel laughter to applause. No one would forget. If this story touched you in some quiet moment, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, so we can keep honoring kindness, authenticity, and inspiration in a world moving ever faster. See you next time.